Hello and good morning everybody, or perhaps it's the evening for you. Welcome to this video on combat in Adventure Awaits. If you followed me up to now, you've seen some selection of videos of what the cards do, and if you have a good memory, you probably have an understanding of how all the components are. And in this video we will show you some simple fighting, because every single game in this genre of dungeon crawling has very different mechanics with cards and dice and tapping and all kinds of ways of doing fights. For us, we're using a selection of polyhedral drop dice, and there's going to be various tokens around and off camera. And obviously I would love to show you some player boards and some proper tokens, but at the moment, as you can see, as a game designer, we always start off with these components which we make at home, and then we can progress to the real deal. As you can see in front of you, we have these professional cards. Well, as you can imagine, they always start off as stickers on cards before we end up trusting our gut feeling and spending money and getting manufacturers all across the world to make prototypes. Hey, if you're on the same track as me, you know where you are. So anyway, let's dive in and try and keep this quite short and simple. So right now, let's pretend that we have gone into a hallway or a dungeon setting and we're going to have a fight. So in front of us right now, I've set up two characters and I've given them their tokens. Now these tokens, these talent tokens, which as it says, rerolls, and they are because of here. Bit of focus in there. So these tokens are connected. Let me get my finger out. So yeah, so they're connected to that, and all I've done right now is set up a dwarf level 1, barbarian level 1, starting weapons only, just to dive into combat. You don't need to see all the other equipment that they have for exploration. And I'll tell you what, let's put the dwarf to one side right now. There you go, one character completely out of the way. And let's bring in this barbarian and his tokens. There we go. So this barbarian has a sword and a dagger on his belt. He has 3 starting tokens which we put up here. And let's just say this barbarian is in a hallway. Let's pretend that we've rolled the black die. It has come up with the threat, and we're going to draw a threat card now, and we're going to see what that threat is. So turning over a card, we have Sly Goblins. Being a level 1 dungeon, it's going to be 2 goblins per hero, so we need 2 goblins, and so we are going to draw those goblins now. At the moment, my artist is working on several projects, and one of those for myself is designing tokens. So in the meantime, we are using these for our monsters. Let me put this away. So as you can see, it's 2 goblins per hero in a level 1 dungeon. This is a level 1 dungeon. We can see that 2 heroes can fight 2 goblins, and 1 hero can use ranged attacks against 1 ranged enemy, because we're in a hallway. I'll put that there. So we now know it's 2 goblins. So these counters, which has M for monster, these will represent our 2 goblins. The game will come with professional tokens with a generalized monster symbol to represent that. So because it's just 1 hero, we're going to put our 2 monsters right in front of us. So in this hallway, the barbarian encounters 2 goblins. With his sword in hand, he charges, and now combat starts. He has a special rule, says charge in. The first fight round, if not ambushed, and we wasn't by the way, my fight roll die is a +1, and that is a +1 DL, which is dice level. The barbarian's fighting is a D8. The next die up from a D8 is a D10, and I will grab that now. There we go. And now the goblins. There's 2 goblins. Now the goblins fight and I'll show you their card, is a D6, and their physical is a D6. And when they damage you, they roll a D8. So they basically got a one-handed spear axe type of weapon. They have 1 health, so 1 wound will kill them. And they have something called defense 2. So they'll be rolling a physical die of D6, and the lowest they can ever get is a 2. So basically 1s get bumped to 2. I'm going to put that over there. That may be on camera, depending on the screen of your device you're looking. So we're in a hallway. We have 2 goblins. We have a barbarian. He draws his sword. He charges in. His fighting goes from a D8 to a D10. Now, I did say goblins, which will be the grey, are a D6. And instead of rolling 2 D6s for 2 goblins, what we do is, because we're outnumbered, the die gets bumped up to a D8. So we swap that to a D8 because there's more than 1. And this D8 is the roll for both of the goblins. But because there's 2 goblins, the D8 minimum will be 2. So I'm going to roll a D10, they're going to roll a D8, and because it's a minimum of 2, if they roll a 1, it becomes a 2. So if we were fighting 4 goblins in a courtyard, it would be a D8 4, meaning they would never roll lower than a 4. So as you can see, the more enemies isn't more dice to chuck, it's about their overall powerful number surrounding you. So we now know the 2 dice. Live on camera, we roll. Goblins get an 8, which is really good. Obviously, they would only roll a D6 and get up to a 6 if it was a single goblin. So actually, that's the highest roll for both. So that D10 represents a 10. And as you may have known in another video, if you roll 7 or more, you actually get a heroic action card. So I'm going to grab one of those off camera. There we go. And we have Battle Cry. These cards, by the way, were shuffled off camera. So Battle Cry, your engaged monsters of bravery up to D6 run off. So even before the combat starts and looks like I was going to kill one of the goblins, both goblins literally run away. So that is that simple in combat. Literally, my screaming battle cry has caused the goblins to run away. So I don't even need to roll for damage. So let me put that card to one side. Let's bring those 2 goblins back in again. There we go. So that is a perfect example of Adventure Awaits. Fits into any movie and scene you can possibly imagine. Let's try that again. Our barbarian is going down the corridor and he encounters 2 goblins. There they are. He rolls a D10 because he's charging into combat with a charge in skill. And as you know, a D6 becomes a D8 because I am outnumbered. And that would be a D8 2. Let's roll those dice again. There we go. We get a 3 and a 6. Now, what that actually means is the goblins beat me and therefore they will get to roll damage. Now, my barbarian has a fight token of a 2. If I would have rolled a 1 or a 2, I would cash in that token and re-roll my die. Wouldn't be easy because I would have to beat the 6. So one of those goblins hit me. So now we will go over to the damage phase and see what happens. Now, the goblins roll a D8 with my finger. There we go. And my barbarian has a physical of a D8. So as you can see, we now have a roll off with the 2 dice. And looking at my tokens, I have a physical 1, meaning if I roll a 1 on my D8, I can cash that in. So a little bit of toughness there. So there we go. Our barbarian is now going to have a fight. And before I do, I've just remembered the back of this card. And it says here, light on one's feet. Start of adventure, if wearing no armor, gain a +1 agility token. So I'm going to drop that in as well, just in case someone has a bow against me, or perhaps if I'm climbing a rope later on when I'm in the exploration phase and fail the roll, maybe that will be cashed in and save me. So let's roll now for damage. Damage is grey, barbarian is going to be purple. So the goblins roll a 7, I roll a 5, that means my barbarian will take a wound. There's your wound token, I can take 3. So there you go, really didn't help the barbarian charging in down that corridor. Now we're into a normal phase of combat, which is the second phase, second round. He will not get the charge in because he's used his momentum, energy and rage to do that, which luckily no one was around to see. So he is now going to continue to roll in the rest of this fight with a d6. We're still outnumbered, so those goblins who are now cackling with laughter are going to roll a d8. And again, we roll for our second phase. They roll a 7, I roll a 4. So once again, one of the goblins slips around me and stabs me with his blade. As you know, physical of a d8 versus the damage of a d8. Simple change of rolls. And an 8 beats a 5. So we can now see that my die rolls today are pretty terrible. My barbarian is taking another horrible wound, and I think he's contemplating, what the hell am I doing here? About to die in this dungeon. So here we go, the third round of combat. And we can see that the barbarian actually gets a blow in against the goblins. Congratulations. So let's go to the hero's damage phase now. The sword is a d8. And a d8 is higher than the physical of a goblin's d6. Now, in this game, if you have a damage roll higher than the other opponent's physical die, it's called mighty damage. And it's not a roll-off, basically because you only get a roll-off if your sort of damage is equal or under their physical. But since the blow of the damage of the sword is higher, it pretty much means, you know, skins shouldn't stop it. The blow will get through. So I'm definitely going to roll my d8. But the goblins won't roll their d6. They will just rely on any defense that they have. And their defense is a 2, which is basically the passive side of armor. So if I don't roll a 1 or a 2, I instantly put this wound through and kill a goblin. And this is where I'm going to roll a 1 or a 2. Hey, I got a 7. That means one of these goblins is now dead. And looking at here, it says experience 5+. So we are going to grab a d6 and I roll a 1. So I didn't get any experience, any sort of learning knowledge from killing that goblin. So one goblin collapses down, gurgling blood, and now I'm facing just one goblin only. I'm not outnumbered anymore. So I'm going to use my continual d8. The goblin will use a d6. Hopefully that goblin is now worried. I roll a 6, goblin robs a 3, I beat him, my blow comes crashing down. As you know, the sword's d8 is higher than a physical of d6, therefore it is mighty damage. I just have to roll this and roll higher than a 2. I roll a 5, goblin is now dead. And we now roll a d6 to see if we get experience of 5+. And we do. So it's wonderful. So what happens now is tiddlywink time. These tokens are now being designed as we speak by my artist. And so far we have gained 1 experience. Once we've gained 10 experience, we will be able to up level our character by flipping this card over straight away and having this side for the rest of the adventure and hopefully his lifespan until he gets another 10 experience points and goes up to a level 3. So we have killed 2 goblins, combat is over. What will briefly happen now is we will say to ourselves, right, combat is over, we go back into exploration, which is the main game board, and obviously we have to try and work out how to get rid of these wounds. To do that, we have bandages that will do that. Perhaps you have a priest in your party and there's certain moments he can try and use healing. And if you have some form of magic user, you'll be able to create a spell. Yes, I did said create a spell, which is something you don't know about, which is this special way of magic works. And that will heal your character. As you can see, if he takes 3 wounds, he is on the verge of collapsing, and being on his own, passing out in a dungeon with goblins is pretty much the end of his career. And there you go. So that was combat between a barbarian and a set of 2 goblins. So why don't we do the barbarian, and let's bring in the dwarf. Let's see how unprofessional I can make this now. And let's finish this video off with a little bit of a different encounter. So right now, we are going to enter the torture chamber, which is a card we would have turned over on the Tales of Adventure board. Let me just off camera put the tokens down for my dwarf. There we go. That's a little bit better organised, Mr. Unprofessional there. You know how we are at Sonic Soul Games. It's real, it's gritty, it will become reality. There we go. Hours of fun for everybody. Tokens off camera, my apologies for that. Let's take away that experience point. Actually no, let's pretend he ends up finding a dwarf in his story and then we're going to fight them. So let's remove this card. We've entered the torture chamber room, we rolled, we found out that we are going to fight orcs. We have an orc card here. Difference between that and a goblin, their physical is a D8, which can affect the weapons that we're using. And they're a little bit more tougher because of the loose bits of armor on their skin and the fact that they are indeed tough. So, dwarf has got a hammer, he has a shield, he actually has armor, he's got common sense, and we've looked at his abilities now. The dwarf ability on camera will be stubborn as an ox, and it says here, may use bravery tokens for physical tokens. So he has a bravery 1 token, and with a physical roll he might be able to cash that in and call it a physical 1 token, even though it's a bravery 1. So they are tough in that respect. And he has drunken rage, which says may use a provision token to re-roll your fight die. I don't have my provision tokens with me at the moment. Let's just say he doesn't have food and drink and on hand. So let's just go with a simple bit of combat and we will go with that. So right in front of us now, we are going to fight. Let me have a look. We have a bunch of orcs. And it's a level 1 dungeon and it's 2 orcs per hero. We know there's 2 heroes. So we have now got 4 orcs. Now, we are in the torture chamber, and it says only 2 can fight 2, and the reason for that is all because of the various implements of death and murder that is lurking around. So even though we've only got 4 orcs here to fight, only 2 are actually going to fight us, and the other 2 are going to be in reserve, and they're waiting to get their blows in. Now the question is, who wants to fight 2 orcs? So the easiest thing to do is to say, well, a barbarian's going to get 1, and off camera, let's put it up there, and the dwarf is going to get 1 each. The person who has the final say will be the first player person token. So if you wanted to, if the dwarf had the first player token, he could say, no, I'm going to fight both orcs for myself, and the barbarian character, or should I say the player, would be a bit sad, and so the dwarf is trying to kill and get the experience for themselves. So the party line parcel mechanic also affects the final say in the matter of dividing monsters to heroes. So let's kick off because of the video time and the total professionalism of this experience. So right, let's say the barbarian will fight first, of course. So he is now going to charge in. He's going to roll a d10 because that is what he does on the first part of his phase. And he's only fighting one orc, which is a d6. So we roll a 7. Orc gets a 3. We get the blow in. And we also reach out for a card. A blow to the limb. Target loses its own defense against this blow. Put that edge of camera. So what that means now is we look at the weapon we're going to roll. It's a sword, where the dice is. It's a d8. Bring that d8 in. And we know that the orc is going to roll a d8 also, because there's the d8 for the orc. There's the d8 for the sword. Because the sword's damage is the same as the orc's physical. As you know, with the goblin, he didn't need to roll his own die because the weapon blow was more powerful, a mighty blow. So in this case, the orc will roll a d8 for his physical, and because it is a blow to the limb, the minimum 3 that we see in the corner here is cancelled. So we actually do get some kind of support, help with our blow. Right. Orc rolls an 8, we roll a 6. Basically, we cause a scar, meaning you don't cause a wound. So our blow slashes across the creatures. Let's stop. Do you remember? Professionalism time now. It is actually a d10 that we roll for damage because we charged in at the very beginning. So there is a chance. And it's equal. On an equal, it means our character gets the blow in, therefore the orc takes a wound, therefore the orc dies. So thank God I remember that terrible mistake. So our orc has now been killed. We will roll a d6 for experience as well as camera shake, and we don't get anything like that. Let's drop this card off camera. And so there we go. So now it's down to the dwarf to fight his orc. And he's going to roll a d8 for fighting, because that's what the dwarf gets. Orc will roll a d6. Hopefully no more mistakes. And excellent. We roll a 7. The dwarf also gets a card. Body slam. After your attack, if your target has a physical no higher than a d8, which is for an orc, the target is stunned. So put that to the corner of the camera. And then we're going to roll the weapon die. The weapon die is a d8, which is on camera now. And we will swap this for the health of the orc. The 5 does not beat the orc's 6. So the orc takes a scar himself. But the good news is he is stunned. And we will give him the knockdown token. And so the orc has been slammed against the wall, or stumbled against some of the furniture in the torture chamber. So that is the round of combat over. But as you know, in the top left hand corner, we know that the orcs have 2 more. So that means another orc is allowed to come into the battle. And we could pick on the dwarf, but we're going to give it to the barbarian. So we are now in turn 2 of combat. So let's go with the barbarian again and speed this up. He's going to roll his d8. The orc will roll a fight of a d6. Camera shake. And off we go. 7 beats a 4. We are doing really well with these special things. A good blow. Increase your damage die by 1. So my damage die is a d8, as you know. We will replace that with a d10. D10 is higher than an orc's D8, which means he only gets his defense of 3. As long as I don't roll a 3, hey, I rolled a 2, which means I cut a huge blow across the chest of the orc. He has a scar, meaning no damage, and that round of combat for the barbarian is done. Hey, let's look around. We got the dwarf now. The dwarf is standing over the orc, who's stumbling back against the body slam. So let's see what we do with that. Right now, I do believe the fighting of the creature of the dwarf is going to be increased to a D10, because obviously his next blow is going to be much better against the orc, and the orc is going to roll a D6. So we gain an advantage now that the orc is stunned and partly knocked over. And we roll a beautiful 9 versus a 1. So even before that orc manages to get up, we hit him once again, and it is a heroic action. Blow after blow. Roll 2 damage dice and apply both to target. My word. So the damage of the hammer is a D8. There we go. We can roll this twice, and he will roll this once. 3 beats the 2. There's no need to re-roll that. This orc, before it even can get up, is knocked over. We will roll for experience, which is a 5+. And we don't get any experience for that. We just get an orc who was body slammed to the ground and pummeled with the hammer. To me, that's a beautiful image. That round of combat is now over. And let's speed this up to the next round. Obviously, we've got room for another orc who comes charging across the room. Does he go to the barbarian? Does he go to the dwarf? The first player token will say what they want to do. So let's say that the dwarf charges in a blood rage after smashing the orc's brains out on the floor. So now the dwarf looks at the orc in rage, and the barbarian with his bloodied sword faces off against his opponent. Let's start and finish this fight with the barbarian. He's going to roll his D8. The orc rolls a D6. Let's see what happens. Off camera, we will see that the barbarian blow did not work. But this is the time we can show off this token. So this means I can roll a 1 or a 2. So the barbarian is now cashing that token in, re-rolling for a 1. Oh dear, this is terrible. But I just realised something. On the sword card, it says may re-roll 1s on a fight die, because it's a balanced weapon. That's the beauty of a sword in the hands of someone that knows how to use it. So we can cash this in itself for a free re-roll, and we get a 4. A 4 and a 4 is a tie, and because there's nothing like a shield to use or any other ability, it means that weapons against each other clash, and that no one does anything in this round of combat. So it's quite a hectic battle with me trying to remember my rules on camera. But as you can see, as in real life, things get crazy. So now we move back into combat once again. So let's have a look what we got now. We've still got the barbarian fighting with blows clashing. And now we look at the dwarf, who now charges across the room and has a go with its hammer against the orc. We know what this roll is, so come on, dwarf. Dwarf rolls a 2, which means he's going to lose combat. Oh dear, hold on. The dwarf has this, can you see? He's going to cash this in now to re-roll this die once again. Come on. Ah, off camera, we got a 1. So I'm afraid it's not a balanced weapon, the hammer, like a sword. That means that the orc actually wins the round of combat. So let's have a look now. The orc is going to roll a D8, which is this. And the dwarf would roll a D8 for its own kind of defense, as it were, against it, which is physical. So we have a roll off. The armor is a D8, which is the same, and it says here we do get a minimum of a 3. So the lowest I can possibly roll now is a 3 on a D8, and he just gets a normal D8. So let's see what happens. Ah, there we go. I'm afraid the blow gets through, and so the dwarf now takes his first wound. Let's put that on the edge of camera. So that was the end of this combat phase, combat round. So now let's try and finish this battle once and for all, and then you can get back to your life. Right, so back to the barbarian. We are going to roll his d8, orcs d6, and we roll 1 again, but as we remember, we can re-roll because of the blade, which is a sword, and we rolled a 6, so our blade comes crashing down onto the orc, and now we know for a fact that it's just a simple roll-off. Come on. Ah, damn. Oh, that's the wrong die. Let's roll this die. Yes, 8 beats 7. We kill this orc. We know it's an experience 5+ roll. And no, nothing is learned by killing an orc. Who would guess? And then finally, it is now down to the dwarf. He has 1 wound. He is fighting 1 monster. Let's see what happens. He's going to roll a d8. The orc will roll a d6 for fight. And we can see that in fact the orc actually gets the blow in. So now back to damage. We know we're rolling a d8 for the armor, and that the 3 is the minimum we can roll. That the orc's blade will be a d8. Who will get the highest? And once again, the dwarf now takes his 2nd out of 3 wounds. The combat round is now over. So what's going to happen next? Well, the dwarf is going to ask the barbarian to help out. Now it's the end of the round of combat. And so the barbarian's going to step in and take away this engaged opponent and give it to him. So the dwarf will stagger back with 2 wounds, even though the armor did not help. And the barbarian's going to draw the attacker away and hopefully get the kill and get more experience than just 1. So the barbarian, d8 for fight. The orc, d6 for fight. And yes, indeed, the blow hits the orc. Now we see what will happen. Come on. And it is a tie. But for the heroes, they will win when it comes to the fight roll. The orc definitely dies. We will roll a d6 for experience. And no, nothing is learned, but dead orcs make for dead corpses. That is a totally amateur playthrough with camera shake, rules mistakes of my own game, and cards half in and half out of camera. I do think though, as you heard by my voice, that if you're not explaining the rules to someone, how exciting, for me at the very least, this game can be. So, we've showed you a combat with the barbarian fighting a couple of goblins, and we saw that twice actually, and we saw how the heroic actions caused the initial goblins to run off. And in the second fight, he took some damage, I believe, and killed the goblins. And in the last example of this amateur hour video, for your pleasure, I hope, we saw the dwarf teaming up with the barbarian. We found the bloody, terrifying, horrible room of the torture chamber. We ended up fighting some orcs because of the furniture and that in the room. Some of the orcs had to stand back as others moved into combat. We found out that dwarf, even though he had a shield, which we didn't get a chance to use properly, and he had armor on, didn't really work out. But the dwarf though did end up pummeling a orc after it was body slammed onto the ground with his hammer, which I thought was quite impressive. Other orcs managed to get a couple of blows in on the dwarf, and then we had to relinquish combat by stepping back, and the barbarian stepped in and took on the last orc and killed. As you can see, I think 4 orcs were killed in this one battle with the torture chamber room. No experience was learned from those simple blows against the crude monster. After this battle, we will go back into the exploration turn as we start going back to the Tales of Adventure board and turning cards over. But before we do, of course, we need to heal up the drawer with any sort of spare cards or abilities off camera. Anyway, I don't think I'm going to refilm that, even though we had to do some rules on the fly as we did it, and cameras and cards were wobbling and all over the place. I actually think that was a very good example of combat, how fast-paced it can be when you're not talking on camera, and how it swings around and gives you that feeling of some dynamic action. Again, this is a way of playing out battles in a dungeon where we're not moving miniatures and tiles. So anyway, I hope you enjoyed that card-based dice combat with a few tokens, and like I said, things are subject to change, a few rules tweaks maybe. The tiddlywinks will disappear into professional tokens, and the same with the cutout tokens we saw for the talent tokens right here. But as you can see, the last pieces of the game are coming together nicely. Anyway, I'll let you guys go. For me, it's a Saturday. I gotta try and work out how to edit this and add some music and get it up for your pleasure on YouTube. I hope you didn't mind this video. If you want me to try and make something a little bit more professional without the wobble and the mistakes, let me know in the comments below, and we can do another combat phase. Maybe I can show you some two-handed weapons, but as you know, they tend to always be mighty blows with these creatures and bypass their own physical role. There's all kinds of extra things that's going on as well. Or maybe we can take the knight into the dungeon and show you something like that in another video. Anyway, let me know if you want to see more without the mistakes. I really appreciate you tuning in today. And yeah, you put a smile on my face through all this videoing. Anyway, brave adventurers, have a good weekend, rest of the day, and I see you around. Bye now.